Hi Janos, here's the feedback from the reading part of the mock exam paper that you did recently, and you scored the full 4 marks for question 1, so that's a good start. Moving on to question 2, where you've been asked to comment on the language used by the writer to describe the effects of the storm. So you've started off saying the writer uses adjectives to create a negative bad feeling such as storm, wind lashing the trees, rain on the rooftop and thunder. None of those words is actually adjectives, so you need to zoom in on the particular words and make sure that you're getting the terminology correct. These are more nouns, and you would need to say how it's creating the negative feelings. You need to give it a little bit more detail. And then in your second one, you've mentioned the quote, Pacific Ocean spilling in furious waves against the rock. And you said the writer uses these words and phrases to create an emotion for the reader, the emotion of fear that something bad is happening to Alexander's mother, which is a fair comment. But you could also have mentioned the fact that the adjective furious here describing the waves is trying to create the feeling of the storm is angry and it's really pounding against the rocks as well. And then in your next paragraph, you said the writer uses metaphors, and you've given the example of him being adrift in the boat, which makes him realise it was just a nightmare. But again, you've not said what the effect is of that metaphor. What effect is it meant to have on the writer? What do you think Alex is feeling? And then you've mentioned about the bulk of the dog was creating a safe feeling and helped him calm down, although that's not really talking about the effects of the storm. And then finally, you've mentioned the writer used complex sentences, and the writer tried to build more pressure with the additional information with commas, as it makes the reader read slower. Again, you've not given an example of that one, so it would have been good if you could have given an example showing the commas using to slow down and to create tension. So whilst you've covered everything overall, I think, but you've not really done it for each point. So I think it's going to be level 2. So if we have a look at the mark scheme, you've attempted to comment on the effect of the language, although I think you need to do it a little bit more in depth and zoom in on particular words, like I said about furious. You've selected some appropriate detail for some of your points, but not for all of them. And you've made use of some subject terminology, mainly appropriately. Well, you've used adjectives incorrectly there, and then you've not given an example of your complex sentences, so I don't know if you've used it correctly there. So it's going to have to be 3 out of the possible 8 marks for this question. Moving on to question 3, where you're asked how is the text structured to interest you as a reader. You've made a good start. When you said at the beginning the writer focuses on Alex's feelings and the atmosphere. It shows that he's nervous and frustrated, and you've given the quote there of the blackbird crashing against the window. And you've said the writer gives hints about Alex's fears that his mother's going to die, and you've not quoted, you've paraphrased that the bird is taking his mother into the sky, heavy with dark colours. It would have been better if you'd actually given the quote there. You said the atmosphere was set negative, but it's not really to do with the structure. That's you've just taken that from the previous question. Then here you've gone back to the structure. The focus changes with the morning from Alex's feelings, which still keeps it negative, and that's where the first mention of his mother is being sick. Again, we needed the quote in there because that is quite a crucial quote, where he says that there've been a lot of days like these since his mother got sick, because as you said, that's the first mention of the fact that his mother's ill, and it kind of makes sense of the nightmare and his fears in the first part. You've then gone on to say the middle part focuses on the daily life of their family since the mother is ill and the father's making the most effort, but he's not a great cook. And you've given the quote about she's going to get better, but without much conviction. And then you finish there, so I'm assuming you stopped there to go on to do some of the other questions. So if we look at the mark scheme, if we look at level 1, Offer simple comment on the effect of structure. Unfortunately, you haven't done that. You haven't said what the effect is of the structure, whether it makes you stop and think about things, or what emotions it's creating in you. So that is going to limit it to band 1, I'm afraid. Select simple references or examples. Well, you have done that, and I would say that probably is at level 2. Select some appropriate examples. Make simple use of subject terminology, not always appropriately. Well, again, I think that's level 2. Make some use, because you said about the middle, you said the focus changes, and you've said at the beginning. But unfortunately, the fact that you've not commented on the effect of the structure is limiting it to band 1. So that's 2 marks out of the possible 8 for this question. Moving on to question 4, where you're asked, to what extent do you agree with the statement that the part set during breakfast time shows that Alex is struggling to cope with his mother's illness? Right. This first part where you says that you agree with the student, his father was making pancakes and so on, all that's not really relevant. It only becomes relevant from here, where you say Alex struggled to cope with his mother's illness. Is shown when Nicole asked when Mama going to get better, and you replies with the shut up, Nicole. And your explanation is he didn't want to hear about the illness or her mother. He was angry, I think, because he felt he could not help. Then a little bit here that's not really relevant. Just be careful about writing about things that are not relevant, because you're wasting your time. Whereas typical teenagers. So here, Alex was frustrated as he saw how his mother was slowly dying. Quite right to give your personal opinion there. He was afraid of his mother's death, felt his mother's absence, and you've given the quote there about all the things he's missing, even a discipline. And then you've given a further explanation. He loved her, and it was very hard for him to see her disappearing from their life. And then you've paraphrased some more of the things that that he missed. And you've given a quote and a good explanation. Though she was still alive, he felt like he'd lost his mother, was already gone. And then again, this isn't really relevant to the actual question. I understand what you're saying, but it's not necessary in the question. The thing that you've not done is show some understanding of the writer's method. So you've not shown or stated how the writer shows you that Alex isn't coping, what methods he's used. So for example, you could have said that the writer shows that Alex isn't coping through the dialogue between him and his sisters, where he's shouting at his sisters, or the fact that the writer shows that he's not coping when he lists all the things that he misses about his mum. And then the comparison comes of what she's like now compared to what she used to be like. So I think you have made some evaluative comments on the effect on the reader. You've done quite a lot of that, explaining how you think Alex was feeling, and a bit where you've expressed your own opinion. You've selected some appropriate textual references, that's your quotes, and you've made some response to the focus of the statement, because you said here, Alex struggled to cope, and several times you've said about him not coping and so on. So really, it is that bit that you've not done. I think we can say that you've done it. Shows simple, limited understanding of the writer's methods. When you've said Alex struggled to cope with his mother's illnesses, showed when Nicole asked, when's Mama going to get better, and he replies with shut up, Nicole. So we can say that loosely you've done it there simply. So I think really it's got to be 5 out of the possible 20, because you've not done that bit. Had you done a couple more of those points showing how the methods that the writers use, then it would definitely have been in the level 2 band.